900,000 miles, 6.7 power stroke. Final teardown. Do you think that was maybe a chunk like that lifter piece right there in your hand?
It could be, yeah. I mean, this is one that didn't. I'm not sure where.
So, I mean, something to that effect.
The other
size.
one's probably in the pan, or was in the pan.
T5.
Oh yeah.
Wait, it has.
You can see the letters in it.
Oh yeah.
Is that on the bottom of there?
Do those have letters on them? Oh my gosh.
No kidding.
It's a
Yes.
It's a GT.
It's a GT. So that
It'll
little
be opposite.
Yeah.
Yep.
That little piece got caught in between the crank
And
and
then
the
that's
piston,
got a
and it broke the
GT on
piston.
it. I mean, it could have happened multiple times, but
That's
yeah.
number 4 piston.
Yep. So that's a lifter. That's not from.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Okay. Cross hatching. So cylinder wear. Dave talked about your load side of your piston is going to be on this upper side or this lower side.
Depending on the side of your engine.
Yeah. So you can see the cross hatching in these cylinder walls through the entire stroke of the bore. You can kind of see in this section right here, you can see some verticals from the piston moving back and forth, but you can still see, even through the verticals, you can still see the cross hatching. They're not as uniform as they would be in a brand new engine. So like these are like the deepest sections of cross hatching that are still there, but it hasn't even worn into the wall of the cylinder enough to delete and erase those cross hatchings. My Jeep, I could only see a tiny bit of cross hatching in one section for a small amount of the cylinder stroke. It had worn all of my other cross hatchings out of the cylinder. This has 893,000 miles on it. My Jeep had 165,000 miles on it.
So roughly a half thou to a thou of taper in all these. In the along the thrust wall.
Along the thrust wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this is thrust.
Yeah. So, and that's partly
And very little,
thrust, partly ring wear.
Yeah.
You're gonna get most of your ring wear at the very, very, very top.
Okay.
Because that's where it has the most pressure and it's pushing those rings
Yep.
out the hardest
Yep.
to seal them.
If I could show you quite a few 6064 blocks, which is honestly could be partly why they went to a CGI, where you have like a big ridge where
Oh yeah, you fill it with your.
a
with your
40
finger.
thou over piston's not even cleaning that up. Like
Yeah.
you're sleeving it. That's it.
Okay.
But yeah, you could see a lot of these in the other direction are nearly dead straight. I mean, you have 80 to 80, 79 to
Side to side.
80. I mean, no more than about a half a thou.
Yeah.
And that's
So that
mostly on the ones that are way more.
Yeah.
So, you know, this one only had 6/10 in the thrust wall direction, only a 1/10 difference top to bottom.
Yeah.
So that's
And these
more
ones
almost
are
that's
fucking
almost ring wear.
Yeah, probably. I'd say.
That would be a more
Yeah.
yeah. This is about how much
Of
ring
nine-
wear you have in
Yeah,
your cylinder.
because there's not really anything on the piston that could wear
Yeah.
that besides the rings.
Yeah.
There's no skirt.
900,000 miles of however many revolutions per minute.
Yeah. And how many
literally you could-
explosions are
Yeah.
happening in this thing over this amount of time.
Would you even bore that? Or you just freaking
I mean-
I mean, yes, because you've got a little bit of tape.
You
A
could.
little of out around.
You could. The thing is, to hone that straight, you'd be taking probably at least 2 to 3 thousandths out of it, and at that point, your piston to
might as
wall
well.
clearance is excessive.
Yeah.
So
So you
based on
have
what
to
we
go
measured,
oversized.
based on what we measured, the piston width, based on like factory bore spec, we're towards the end of let's see, piston clearance. We're about 2.5, 3 thousandths clearance based on those pistons right now. If we have to take 2 to 3 out, we're at 5 to 6 thou
thousandths.
piston
Yeah.
wall
and they
clearance.
don't make a 5 to 6 thousandths over piston. They make a 10
Yeah.
or 20.
Actually, I don't even know if they make
Or
a 10.
30.
Yeah, 10.
I don't know
about
on the engines,
about
on
20. 20, 30, 40 is roughly
20,
the
30, 40.
yeah. It's kind of rare to find a 10. Something like this you'd want to find a 10 because it's something that, you know, in machining for me it's take this least amount
possible.
to get it back to spec.
Yeah.
And more so that later on down the line when you do another rebuild, you can go to that 20 piston or you can go to that 30 piston.
Okay. So in
Yeah,
another,
so you would
2 million miles, then
Yeah.
20,000 piston.
Yeah. I would bore that just because that's
Okay.
that's our
makes
process.
sense.
Yeah. Well, and you've got to marry the, at least in industrial, like you don't ever put new rings on an old cylinder wall. They marry together.
Yep.
So you gotta at least do something to resurface it. And if you're gonna resurface it,
You might as well machine it.
you gotta machine it. And you can't just take 2 or 3 thousandths out of it. You gotta go 10 at least.
And then with a new
Yeah.
with a new piston
With
to
the new
match
piston.
up. Yep.
Yeah.
About the same. I mean, that's just coating. The piston hasn't even worn. I mean, the coating, we tear motors down and the coating will be gone. You know, the coating is unmeasurable almost. It's so thin.
We'd be right at spec on clearance on those pistons.
Here's the other thing. I mean, let's go look at these rings under a microscope. Let's just go do that.
So that one's usually jammed into the piston, not
Yeah,
freely moving like you're moving it
Well,
right
yeah,
now.
it's hard to get a motor to go, 300,000 miles, and guys change the oil every, 3,000-4,000 miles, and it still is loose like this. Usually they're just all gummed up. This is nothing. The other nice thing about it is there's really no galling on this, so. I'm a believer in this secondary bypass. It's definitely working. How much your flow you're getting in there? You got a 13 quart system.
It's about a quart per minute on the.
Really?
Yep. So every 13 minutes you're going through the system.
Wow, it's working. I got one of these on my truck. Yeah. Wow. It's worth it.
Thousandths clearance, which I think the top of spec is about thousandths and 1/10. Roughly what I'm getting. I mean, it is warm, so it might be a little excessive. I mean, 900,000 miles of a pin beating up that bushing.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's really impressive.
So this is your valve recession.
Yep. So these intakes were at 47 thousandths roughly.
Let me write that down.
Hand me that sheet. So intake has, they have a pretty big range. Intake and exhaust are supposed to be 0.035 to 0.050. These two intakes are at 0.047, so they're in spec.
And that spec is intake and exhaust, or is that just the intake?
Same as exhaust. And these exhausts measure about the same.
0.047.
Yeah. Plus or minus a thousandths.
Okay.
But these aren't perfectly clean,
Yeah.
There could be a little dirt or something like that, so that's roughly. And looking at the seats, I don't have anything that looks like excessive wear, so I'd imagine they're all
Within
plus
spec.
plus or minus a couple thousandths of that.
I mean,
so
and
that's
they
not
are
too bad.
47 is close to 50. They're worn. They've got 900,000 miles on them.
They're worn. Who knows what they set them at?
Yeah, we don't know what they started at.
Yeah, so I can't say that 35 is where they set it, and then it wears to 50. That's just a range of what it can be.
Yeah.
So you can see still, your edges of, if I grab this, there's some crust here, but you have your top angle, and then you can see a pretty hard edge into where it seats. This is where it's seating.
How wide that pattern is.
How wide it is. This is a seating angle intake of about 30 degrees, but then you can see a hard edge going into the bottom angle there.
Okay.
Same with exhaust. You could see just a little band of that top angle, your seating angle, which the seating angle on this does look a little wide, a little bit of wear. You can still see a hard edge.
So you got a top angle, a
Yep.
seat angle, and then an inner angle, and you can see both of those seat edges, seating angle edges, so they're not worn into the head yet.
Yeah. If you look at like 7.3 over here, it's like round.
Oh, okay.
So these ones are like pretty beat into. They're
And you
worn really wide.
you can't really see this upper angle
Yeah.
or the lower angle.
It's just like
the bore.
it's just like they're just look mushed. I
So
mean,
that
the
seating angle has worn into
Yeah.
this.
on its intake. So
Okay.
the exhaust, you could actually still see a little bit of those edges.
It actually looks like it wore into it on this one.
Yeah, they
Like,
wore a
this
little
is-
bit.
This is where it was up here, and it actually is
Yep.
inside,
Yep.
worn down into
But
the
these,
head.
this one's got almost a hard edge from wear.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. To see that difference
Yeah.
and to understand it, you've got 3 angles.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
this angle
Not-
actually
not-
wore into your other two.
Yeah.
And
Not
that,
all
and it almost
heads.
disappeared.
Not all heads are machined with 3 angles. I mean, most newer engines, gas, diesel, are going to have multiple angles.
Okay.
That's more of a flow thing than.
Mhm.
But
That makes sense.
But yeah, these seats are like, that would probably be getting cut out for new valve seats and then remachined. These seats could just get recut.
Just hit that 30-degree angle again, and
We'll hit with a 3 angle cutter that just kind of mimics what the factory does.
okay,
Basically just restoring it back to factory spec.
that makes sense.
So we'll cut the seat a couple thou, we'll machine the head a couple thou, and that recession will stay
In spec.
roughly, yeah,
Okay.
what it is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but the stems, I can tell you the first thing I notice here is you can still see the laser etching of the valve number, but there's very little, just a little bit of galling here, very minimal. I can't feel it. And in fact, why don't we just go real quickly and take a look at it under a microscope. It could be, yeah, see, it's gone.
Oh, okay.
My Scotch Brite actually scored the valve stem more than 900,000 miles of wear
wow.
did. Because before I Scotch Brited that, it didn't have all those.
This is the original coating on the bearing mains. There's a couple of scratch marks on there from when the lifter failed. It sent some big pieces of metal through the system and made some big scratch marks. But other than that, the coatings, the original manufacturer's coating is still on there.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, you can, you know, when you have lines like that, that's something that, okay, now all of a sudden a piece of debris got in there, and here, and it's obvious what the debris is. But as far as, you know, wear from, you know, oil or carbon down in your oil, this motor is as clean as I've ever seen one.
Are we looking for difference between
This is the
upper and lower?
You'll kind of get with, I mean, with the coated versus non-coated, you'll sometimes get a little bit different. So we got 0.0762.
And these aren't necessarily in order.
Yeah. Same thing. They all seem the same so far. Yep.
Forward bearing.
Forward bearing to compare it to.
But there's obviously not a whole lot of difference between the 8 of them either.
Yeah.
So we didn't have.
We had consistency through the bearings.
I can't remember what.
Which is more more of, I guess, what matters is consistency of housing bores plus consistency of bearing thickness,
Yeah.
and that your clearance is in spec. 761. And 760.
I mean, if I was in a pinch and I didn't have main bearings, I'd put these back in it.
That's exactly what I was looking for
I
right
mean,
there.
I mean, seriously, if we're here to prove a point, I don't know how we haven't improved it. You know, a secondary oil filter for the cost is probably one of the best investments you can make. That and good oil and a good fuel additive is the best investment you can make for longevity.
So 2.8346.
So zero.
That's in one. Yeah, that's in one spot. I mean, if I go to the side.
3.1, 75 plus 13, 75, 85, 80, 88. Right at the minimum.
Minimum?
Yeah. This journal's not warming at all.
Still in the factory spec.
Yeah.
Just measured. I have, 1/10 variance from here to here.
Nothing. It's like a brand new crank.
Up against either way. So I'm pushing it to you.
Push it, yep, this way. We'll zero it.
Okay.
7,000.
7,000.
This has a 12 thousandths max is what they have on the spec sheet. They don't have a range.
Okay.
7,000.
But you want some.
Yeah, you
You don't want it to be zero.
depending on the engine, usually their minimum's roughly around 3,000. Top is around 8 to 10 depending on the engine.
And
so
this one's 12.
7.
Well, yeah. The high range on this one is 12 though.
Yeah.
But it's actually at 7.
So it's
Okay.
thrust.
Thrust is
It
still
could have
within spec.
warned, but it's still in spec. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, in its current condition, at 900,000 miles, it was still within thrust spec.
Yeah. Which I mean,
All of these.
It's a manual. You're pressing on that clutch. It's trying to push that crank forward. Torque
Down the flex
convert.
blade.
Same with the torque converter. It's trying to push that crank forward.
Yep.
So you're going to see most of your wear on this guy. Which this, I mean,
We
they
don't know which
they
one was
fit
which.
the same.
Yeah.
But honestly, if you saw, that's probably the back one because you could see all that wear. So I'd say this probably has a couple thou wear, maybe 2,000ths wear or so into it, but we're still in that spec.
Sweet. Do you recommend still with the secondary oil filter? Do you say, hey, let's just stay with the factory?
If you've got the bypass filter on it, check it at the 5,000. At that half mark of what factory says.
And
Check it at the half.
And with
Yeah.
that being said, and I've said this, most people have the same driving habits. They drive 30 miles to work, 30 miles back. They go up in the mountains, take the boat up once a month or something like that. They're same driving. So it's not like you got to do this oil analysis on every oil change.
Yeah, you just till you figure it out.
Establish, and now if your driving habits change, then you need to have the oil analysis done.
Tone more.
Yeah.
whatever.
If all of a sudden, the truck was your weekend warrior, but now the truck is your work truck, and you're towing a Bobcat with it every day. Up a mountain. Then you're going to want to change your oil analysis checking.
Just change your oil blindly.
Yeah.
You can just go in half.
Right.
So, but if you do the analysis, you'll see that the trend it starts to extend a lot farther than even what the factory recommends.
Okay, so we've documented our measurements from factory new to where we're at now with close to 900,000 miles on this motor. Had a little exhaust valve guide wear, something that we'd see normally at 250, 300,000 miles. I wouldn't call it excessive. So we had wear there. Really no measurable wear in our bearings, main and rod bearings. Minimal wear in our wrist pin. Ring package looks absolutely unbelievably pristine, to be honest with you. No wear on the crank journals. Our piston cylinder wall, our cylinder walls,
Maybe max 1,000ths wear.
about 810.
Which is both in thrust and ring wear combined.
A ring package, on a cylinder wall, to have that minimal amount of wear is really unusual because you've got a tremendous amount of ring tension on a diesel ring. And that is the highest friction point in a motor is the rings to the cylinder wall. I mean, if you really wanted to rebuild this motor, I'm going to say it, but because I have said it, if I was in a tight spot, I'd reuse the bearings, I'd reuse the pistons, I'd get some new rings in it, new lifters. You're going to have to do the cam, but the crank is good. Polish the crank. You know, you could basically you could do a rebuild in this and, probably go another 500,000 miles because of the wear on them, which is basically so minimal. You guys are going to teach us maybe a little bit about how you found a way to prolong the maintenance interval and to help out these engines last a little longer. So,
So the Lorenzos Oil.
yeah, tell me about Lorenzo. And I got to know the name. Tell me where the name came from.
So the founder of the company's name is John Lorenzo.
Okay.
He was a tribologist, studied lubrication for 30 years. He developed both of these products before he passed away. And so this is what he's been testing in the industrial commercial world for years.
Okay.
Many years.
Lots of years.
Now, did you know the man?
Yeah.
He did.
Yep. He
Wow.
was my partner.
Oh, okay.
And so we've seen the results in the industrial and commercial world with these, but his idea was to bring it to the consumer world, where anybody with a pickup or a car can get the same benefits out of this.
So he was, and the industrial world is like mining,
Yep, mining, trucking
construction.
company.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yep. So the Lorenzos Oil is a Tier 4 full synthetic oil mixed with a industrial grade ad pack, and then it has a WS2 topper on it. And the WS2 is tungsten disulfide. And what the tungsten does is when the engine gets up to 180 degrees, it adheres to all the moving parts inside of the engine, creating a sacrificial layer that can be worn off as the engine's running over time.
What does the surface of your metal look like? Does it look like this?
No.
Under a microscope? It looks like this.
Yes.
Right? So this tungsten disulfide, actually, it acts almost like the ceramic coat you put on a paint.
It's a surface modifier.
It's a surface modifier. So it fills all these holes and it makes it to where it's smoother and reduces the friction inside of your engine.
Yeah. What he's trying to say with the fingers here, he's giving you the fingers, but he's saying that every metal surface under a microscope is not like smooth like glass. It has valleys and peaks in it, and those valleys are important for retention of oil. I mean, in a cylinder wall, and I've spoken about that. Is that what you're talking about?
So you
So it
talked
doesn't
about it with
fill
the
them all
connecting
in.
rod bearings,
Uh-huh.
right? You've got the striations for the oil.
Uh-huh.
But even within those striations, the microscopic mountain peaks and valleys that create friction, those are almost filled in. It's where you're reducing the friction inside your engine. The actual power it takes to turn that engine around is less because you've reduced the friction with the WS2.
And it's more of putting the coating on top of the striations and in the valleys,
Yeah.
but it fills them in a little bit
Now
so
we-
that as it rides on it, anytime that during startup or
Have you done testing on this for
Yeah.
friction? Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Okay.
So that what they've seen in the friction is a 60% reduction in friction. So and some of them gone to like 0. You test the engine pre-tungsten, after tungsten, they can't even measure friction in it. So
Well,
it's,
now once it gets up to 180 degrees, does it do that continually, or does it do that the one time?
continually until there is no more
Okay.
nano tungsten left in the oil.
From the oil.
Okay.
So, but it has like the healing also, so if you got a part that's rubbing really hard
Uh-huh.
and it's creating a groove, it'll go to that part first and adhere in there first, because that's the part that gets hot at
Oh.
180 degrees first.
Okay, cool. And pricing comparable to, say,
Pricing
AMS oil? Everybody knows AMS oil.
So
Is it
we
pricing?
recommend 15,000 mile oil changes with our bypass filter on
Yes,
this. If you
with.
consider that, it's about the same price as T6.
And let me tell you, these guys are big proponents. They've been spouting it here while I've been working with them. Oil analysis.
Yes.
They prophesy that, in which I totally agree with.
15,000 mile oil changes with an analysis at 5,000 and a 10,000 and a 15,000.
Yeah. So tell me, the truck that we just kind of dissected, the engine that we just dissected at 900,000 miles. Tell me about the interval and the testing that was done on that.
We put this on within the first couple of months, but
Okay.
he had almost 100,000 miles on it by the time he put this on.
Okay.
And so he wanted to do some cleanup from the first almost 100,000 miles and so he was changing this filter and his engine filter and the oil every 5,000 miles.
And this is the 1 micron secondary
Yep.
filter.
Yes.
So he's changing the 1 micron secondary, the engine filter, and the oil at 5,000 mile intervals for 4 or 5 intervals.
Okay.
And then he changed with the oil sampling, and he was seeing what his samples looked like, and they looked good, and so he went out to 10,000 mile intervals.
Okay.
For
With
3 or
with a
4
sample
intervals.
at 5.
Okay,
So
now,
he'd sample it at 5, and then he'd change it and sample it at 10.
okay, let me slow you down. So at first he's sampling it at 5, then he bumps up to 10,
Yep.
and then I'm sure he bumped it up. How often is he changing is he when he's sampling it, is he changing that? How often is he changing
Every
it?
time on the first, because he wanted to do some residual cleanup.
Okay. I'm trying to get it established here where we finally end up to get a motor to look like
Yeah.
a.
So we're
got
talking about the first 8 intervals after he put the bypass filter on.
Okay.
After that, he's at 15 now, and so he kind of sees what his oil does for 5,000, for 10,000. Now he's changing the engine filter and the oil every 15,000
Okay.
for a few intervals, and then he goes to 20,000, and then he goes to 25,000.
Get out of here.
And
Really?
he went up to 35,000, and his sample reports, he's shown them all of his sample reports to us, and the oil's still 90% good.
And he's like, but I got to change it because I'm at
Yeah, he's
35,000.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's 35,000. I got to change this.
So, how often do you recommend you change the secondary filter? As often as you change the primary?
If you start from a brand new engine,
Uh-huh.
you can start at the 15,000 mile oil change or intervals. If you have an engine that has a bunch of miles on it, you probably want to do some residual
Because this
cleanup.
thing is going to be cleaning up.
It's gonna be picking up all that garbage and-
carbon and all the buildup that's in your engine.
Good question. So that's a great question. People are going to, because a lot of people that are watching this have already got trucks that got,
Yeah.
100,000 miles on it,
Yep.
maybe 150,000. So your
So
recommendation.
those would recommend change this every time you change your oil and your engine filter.
Gotcha.
And then when you sample, after you start sampling and you see what the oil is going to look like, you can kind of tell
Extend-
how far you can go with
So you
this.
can extend this.
Yep.
You match this filter change with your primary filter.
Yes.
Is that what
Yes.
you're saying? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
For the first few intervals to get some residual cleanup. And then you can go out to the 15,000 mile.
Okay. Now listen, I've
Changing
tried.
this.
I've tried to ask the questions you'd all ask, but I know you guys are going to have some more questions, so put them in the comments, okay? But I think did we cover maybe on that part about how we do that? Because that's important.
I think so.
Everybody, I would think 90% of the people watching this are going to be like, okay, how often do I do this? So just to recap, do an oil analysis, use the Lorenzos, put the secondary bypass filter on there, go 15,000 miles, have an oil analysis done. Did I get that right?
Nope.
If that's a brand new engine.
If it's a brand new engine.
Okay.
Yes, do
Yes,
that.
you got that.
Okay.
If you have an old engine,
Uh-huh.
start at 5.
Okay.
Change this.
Because that's going to get, that's going to start picking
Picking
up
up all the
sludge and
sludge
crudge.
and-
All the stuff that's collected in your engine for the first however many miles you had on it.
Gotcha.
So change the bypass filter cartridge
And the
primary and your engine spin-on filter,
Right.
or cartridge, whichever one it
Right.
is. 5,000
For 4 intervals.
for 4 intervals.
Okay. Don't even
4
don't
times.
even waste your time on an oil analysis or
I
money.
mean, you can still analyze the oil every 5,000 miles to see what you're trending.
Uh-huh.
And you could
Because you can watch the numbers go
Part of
down.
counts go
of
down.
running this
Okay.
for 4 intervals.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It gets complicated.
No,
It's not. It is.
Well,
This is
you-
not a blanket punish. This is not a throw everything perfect.
Right. I like that.
We
though.
can work this.
I like that. You're saying, okay, if you've got a used engine, 5,000 miles, do it 4 times every 5,000.
Bump up to double. and
Gotcha.
then
Start
Again until you're sampling, you can see how far you can go.
Well, that's worth the money if you can get 25, 30,000 miles out of an oil change and feel
It pays for
comfortable.
itself real quick. when
Yeah,
you're done
yeah.
that, So.
Wow. You know, I'm a big fuel addict. You guys know it. Dave's Secret Sauce, which is an OptiLube formulation, which is the best formulation. You look up the, these guys will believe in it too. They'll tell you that it is.
We've seen it.
We've seen it.
Yeah,
I've used it.
It is the best diesel fuel additive you can have for lubricity, anti-gels, and cleaners. But this is something that you put on top. You add to the OptiLube. Is that correct? So tell me about that.
So it is a combustion improver. It's a polymer-based fuel additive, and those polymers encapsulate and equalize size of your particulates of fuel. They encapsulate it. They keep it from sticking to your cylinder walls, your piston, your head, and they keep it entrained in the air and equally sized. So you get a more
Well, you're talking about
complete-
atomization of fuel.
Yes, it makes the atomization of the fuel more uniform.
Okay, here's the question. I'm going to ask it for you, so you don't even have to put it in the comments. Testing. Have you had the testing done on it?
Some testing done with an infrared camera that actually shows when the combustion happens, all of those molecules were very close to all the same size. They burned at the same time frame and same temperature. The other testing that we've done is the emissions. And on emissions, this will reduce hydrocarbons 90% at idle, 60-something, 63% under load. And so that's the biggest thing. You're getting
And
a complete
hydrocarbons,
burn
everybody, that's
hydrocarbon.
unburned fuel.
Unburned fuel.
Unburned fuel.
Yep.
Because it's encapsulated in all those molecules, you have a more complete burn within your combustion chamber. You're using all the fuel. You're not leaving any soot behind.
Yeah.
You're burning it all.
And
So
so,
the other-
was this gentleman, the 900,000 mile motor, was he using this?
He was using this from the time it hit the market. He was using another additive similar to OptiLubes prior to that, and then with this. So
And then
this
additive-
additive works really great with the OptiLube additives and some of the other lubricity and cetane.
And you know,
flavors.
you guys, the video on that motor, there's not a lot of carbon ingestion. I mean, those pistons are pretty dang clean. Those rings are phenomenal. And so,
And what? So with emissions reductions, right? Hydrocarbon reductions. What does that do for your DPF?
well, it doesn't load it up.
It doesn't load it up.
And the other
It
thing that
lasts
doesn't load it-
longer.
So that's the other testing we've done. It reduces the regens by 63%. as
Let
well.
me tell you what else will reduce that. Ready? Don't idle your truck. And do not start your diesel truck up cold and just let it sit there and warm up island. That does not work. That is a
It
bad.
pumps out a lot of hydrocarbons into your DPF.
And,
Yes.
and plus it burns. It puts a lot
Puts
of
a lot
carbon
in
down
your-
into
in
your
your oil.
ring pack.
Yes.
Yes.
It's not a good idea. And if you don't believe my results, I'm sorry. I can't help you.
Look at that 900,000 mile engine. He's used fuel additive in every single tank.
Yeah.
The
And-
CP4 pump went to 900,000.
Yeah, that's
In
the
that same
CP4
truck.
pump.
This is mostly for combustion.
Yes.
Yeah. Well. Okay.
So if you're burning cleaner, your DPF doesn't have to regen as often, and it
Stop.
stays cleaner longer.
Yeah.
Saves you fuel when you're regenning less.
Yes.
I mean,
So-
we all there's nothing good about DPFs.
No.
I just have it. EGR and DPS.
But if you can prolong it,
So John
prolong it.
John designed this because of the government
now
emissions.
is John that was
John
your
John
partner?
Lorenzo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well. Okay. Well, cool. You do this right, like we just talked about. You could be the guy that goes 1,000,000 miles without coming to see Dave, and I'm okay with that because I'm busy. Hey, if you want any of these great products, and I would suggest you get them all, man, for your truck. It's gonna save you money in the long run. There's a link in the description, and Insane Diesel. Thank you, man. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
Seriously, guys. Thank you.
appreciate it, Dave.